Hello, and thanks so much for joining us this evening for Barber's Knoxville Summer of 1915. I can't think of a better time to perform this piece than right now, when what many of us are craving most is nostalgia, which is exactly what this piece embodies. James Agee wrote this poem in 1936 in only an hour and a half, and the majority of the work was actually improvised with very few provisions following. It is just a reflection of his childhood, his last summer in Knoxville, right before his father passed in 1916 from an automobile accident. This text recalls the sights and sounds of the bustling town and the night under the stars with his family. While he describes this normal evening with his family, he dives into a deep existential thought about how this moment is much more than just talking casually with family. He likens it to the stars and makes us realize that moments like this mean the universe to us as humans, even if we might not recognize it at the time. At the end of the text, Agee points out that while our family, friends, and upbringing might impact the people we become as adults, they will never define who we ultimately are as unique individuals, just like the stars. Barber set this text in 1947 to music as he was dealing with the death of his own father, which mirrors Agee's inspiration for writing this beautiful poem. I am so honored to be sharing this music with you tonight with the incredible Tim Steele at the piano, and I am thankful to my Emmanuel music family for all their hard work and support during this time. So without further ado, here's Barber and Agee's Knoxville Summer of 1915.
Hi, Sarah. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is M. Ryan Turner, the Artistic Director of Emmanuel Music, and I'm joined here with uh, friend and colleague Sarah Moyer. Fantastic to hear you. And I have to say, being a singer myself and being in isolation and realizing how little I personally have been singing, I'm thoroughly impressed with the amazing vocal shape that you're in. And I actually want to start by asking you that question. And I think our audiences would love to hear it. What have you been doing to stay in musical and vocal health?
You know, I've been working on this actually. At the beginning of COVID, I decided that I wanted to have a project, and I really thought that this would be the perfect time to learn Knoxville. It's a bucket list item, and it just seemed like it was just the perfect time. So I've been doing that, but I've also been learning how to play the ukulele, and I've been singing music from the Tin Pan Alley genre, and I've been hired twice to do Tin Pan Alley concerts. So I've been doing some early 1900s pop music, but at the same time working on this. And that's really the most I've been doing. But this has been enough to keep me in vocal health. It is a feat. It's really not the easiest piece in the world, and so it's been a lot of fun learning it.
Well, you sound in tip-top shape and
Thank you.
absolute beautiful performance. And I should also recognize our colleague Tim Steele, who was playing piano, who played so beautifully and sensitively, which leads me to, I think, an interesting point to discuss is just the whole production process. How did you and Tim collaborate? How did this come about, and what were the technical challenges? Because you never met in person, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. It was a little nerve-wracking at first. I mean, of course, I had no doubts that this wasn't going to be awesome, but of course, as this is my first time to do a digital collaboration with somebody, and I thought it was so cool. Tim and we met up on the phone about a few weeks ago just to discuss musical, just ideas for the piece.
Mhm.
So we went through the entire score. We talked about all the writs and ralls that we possibly could talk about,
Mhm.
and we decided on a really nice little roadmap, basically. And he went and he did a beautiful recording of it, which is the one that you just heard, and that's what I used. And I was like, okay, here we go. I listened to it the first time, and with all the rallentandos and just any time that we had just any rubato, I was like, oh no, how am I going to keep up with this? But after I repeated it 1,000 times, I was like, I finally understood the timing as if it was the way I learned the piece. So,
Mhm.
I mean, at a certain point, it's not a lifetime collaboration, but I actually felt like I was collaborating with him. And he's such an amazing musician. He made that possible. He really did. So it was when it came down to the recording process, I actually felt like I was making music with a human, which I did not expect to feel that way at all. So it was very delightful, actually.
That's great. Well, having worked with Tim a number of times in my younger years as a singer, I know exactly what you're talking about. So, Tim, if you're listening, thank you for your always vocal sensitive artistry. It's great to have a collaborator like you. Um, so, you and I are both um, from southern parts. You're from Oklahoma. I'm originally from Texas. There is something about this piece that always speaks to me in that way and reminds me of the sort of lingering light of lazy, hazy summer evenings growing up. And I'm just wondering, is there anything as you sing this? I mean, in your introduction, you talked about nostalgia, which I think is exactly what this piece is about. And it's always interesting to me that both Barber and James Agee, their response to loss of a father, and in Barber's case, his mother, Louise Homer, who was a contralto who got him into music and in singing himself, their response was not anger, but of nostalgia. And I wonder if there's anything that about the nostalgia aspect of this and growing up in the South that speaks to you specifically.
Definitely. I think most recently, since I've been working on this piece, it's been harkening back to my time in my first childhood home, which when I was running around barefoot, basically. And there's something about the smell of the South in the summer that is
Hmm.
completely different than up here. And it's that kind of damp grass smell because it's always humid, and it's
Hmm.
running around barefoot. Firefly. I hate bugs, but I miss seeing fireflies, and I miss, hearing the crickets chirp. I don't miss the June bugs at all. But
No.
I do miss being outside and just as a child, not even caring about, being indoors. I think that was something that I really was like desiring for during this piece. It just made me think of summertime in Oklahoma as a really young child. And then of course there were other instances that I was thinking of too, but that's just the one that stuck with me because I love being outdoors, and it's been so hot here and we haven't really been able to
Hmm.
stay outside much. And so yeah, it's been making me desire to go outside in Oklahoma in the summer. So.
Exactly. Well, one of the things about this piece that I didn't expect to resonate with me in the way it did, but as you were singing it, I was reading along with James Agee's text because it's such a gorgeous bit of prose. And that it reminded me so much of right now, everything that we're all sort of going through, and how in the midst of this awful pandemic, what I have found for me personally is a sort of slowing down, which I am so grateful for. And the idea, I've had many nights with my family sitting out on the patio, the kids playing, my wife and I just sitting at the table chatting and listening to the sounds of summer and life slowing down a bit, which I think is something that we can all be grateful for in the midst of this. And as I mentioned, the fact that these two, the composer and James Agee, responded to loss and something awful with nostalgia as opposed to anger. And it was something that really sort of resonated with me as you were singing. And I wonder if there's anything about that as you were working on this made you sort of slow down a bit.
Definitely. I would say a lot of I would say a part of the piece that really made me slow down was thinking about the family aspect. As we get older, our family moves on into, a different life. And so I think that one of my favorite parts, Tim and I actually talked about this. I forgot to tell you that we actually had a coaching, like a follow-up, which was really lovely to discuss the piece even further. And, we were discussing about when he's talking about just like when they're laying there on the quilts, and talking about the family, and when he mentioned his mother, like in the most fond way, but he's like, and my father's good to me too. And I started realizing that a lot of that, I think, is interesting because he lost his father at such a young age, and so he's looking back at this life that he obviously had, that he remembers fondly about his mother, but I don't know if he remembers much about his father. So of course he gives him homage, he's like, he gives him credit, but it's his mother who took care of him, it's his mother who who's there for him. So that's something that I was really pondering about, though, just thinking about all of my family who has been there for me, and like thinking about just growing up, and also like we can't see our family right now, they're so far away. And so missing them, because I would normally see them about, this time of the year. And so just thinking about how profound my family is to me, we're all very close and very tight. And it seems like he was with his aunt and his uncle and his parents as well. And so I think that has really made me think about a lot about my family and a lot about how I miss them a lot.
We did just get a question, and I'll read it verbatim. It says, the way Barber sets this text is genius and quite complicated. How did you go about making this text come alive so well? And what about Barber's tonal language feels so American? And if I can just personally add to that, I think it's good for our audience to remember that while we think of Barber as a composer of opera, and of course we know of his adagio for strings and songs, but he was also a very, very accomplished baritone himself. In fact, the first recording of his great piece, Dover Beach, was Samuel Barber himself singing. So I think it's important to think about this as you answer this question, and think about the way Barber sets text, not as a composer, but also as a very accomplished singer.
Yeah, I felt very natural singing it. It was as if I was speaking. Once I just started singing, I was just like, oh, this is like, I mean, dare I say it, it's like musical theater. It's just like, it just comes off as conversation, essentially. So I felt very comfortable singing. And actually, as a really light soprano, I've always thought it's always been like, I've always just assumed that larger voices sing Barber. When you're in college, you're just very much pushed away from singing Barber if you don't have a lush voice. And so this is my first, venture out with a solo Barber piece. And I don't know, as a light voice, I just have always thought, oh no, that's not for you. You can't do that. And now that I'm singing, I'm like, yes, you can. This is totally like speech-like. It's just so comfortable to sing it. And as you said, like, he was a singer, so it really comes across. He knew how to write for the voice. And I felt in no way that anything was out of the extremes of the range. It was all very comfortable. Maybe that low B or B flat, whatever it is, I was like, ugh. No, it's a D. It's really low, whatever it is. But I was like, why did you write this? Anyway, so I felt it was just so natural. As far as his tonal language is concerned, I wasn't really thinking too much about that, but I do think that it is a very simplistic approach. I don't think that there's anything very complicated or complex about his tonal, like about the writing. It's and if it is complex, he hides it very well. because it just sounds so natural. It just sounds so non-contrived. It's just a perfect piece in everything, in every way. And I think that's why it's such a popular piece. I think some people have asked me, why is this such a popular piece? Why does everyone want to sing it? And I think it's just because there's something just so perfect about it. And especially when you sing it, you'll realize that. Like you'll understand it more than anything than when you listen to it.
Well, I think that's a great point, and that's probably a good place for us to end as well. But is that I think Barber's music speaks to the performer and to the listener in both equal ways, and there's an accessibility to it, yet at the same time the performer can appreciate the complexities that have gone into making it so accessible to the listener, and the natural speech quality of the writing, which I think is so appealing and immediately enjoyable. There was one other question. Oh, sorry, I was going to mention one other thing, because the original orchestration of this piece is grand. And then a few years after it premiered, he pared down the orchestration to something quite small: single woodwinds, 2 horns, trumpet, strings, and percussion and harp, which is very much doable for a soprano of your type of voice, which leads me to believe that this was, for him, the most important thing was the text, not, as you mentioned, the lushness of it. That is a result of it, but the point is get the text out.
I do wonder, like singing with full orchestra, I'm like, how is that possible? To get all that text out, especially with some of like the dry and exalted noise of the locusts. It sits pretty low, and it's just so like in a way monotone that I'm like, how would you hear that over? I mean, I don't know what the instrumentation is at that point, but still, there are many points in there where I'm like, this could not go well.
We do have, I know I said we were going to end, but there is one more question here. Somebody wrote in it that said, has learning this piece inspired you to learn others? And if so, which ones by Samuel Barber?
I have not even thought about that yet. I have been so focused on this particular one, but I definitely would totally be up for exploring other Barber pieces, because now I'm sold on the fact that I can sing Barber.
Of course.
Yeah, I definitely do want to look into more Barber. That would be really awesome.
I will just say that the text by James Agee, this was not the first collaboration he had with James Agee, because his very well-known song "Sure on the Shining Night" is by the same text, is by the same author as well. And for those of you that are interested, there are things about this that I think harken back a little bit to Copeland Appalachian Spring. And also there's a great American composer, John Corigliano, who wrote a piece in 1960 for mezzo and orchestra and also chorus called Fern Hill, which he is very much influenced by the Knoxville Summer of 1915 text and colors and orchestral palette that Samuel Barber uses. Well, listen, Sarah, this is fantastic to hear you. Great to chat with you. And thank you so much. And thanks to Tim Steele. And I want to encourage our listeners to come back next week, where we will have violist Sarah Darling performing for us as well. So until then, everybody, and you as well, Sarah, stay well, stay healthy, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.